Hello, boring dreamers. Today, we are going to throw away your alarm clock, smash your Google Calendar, and trade your ergonomic office chair for a three-legged stool and a patch of dirt. We are going back to a time when hustle culture meant literally hustling a pig out of your kitchen, and the concept of inbox zero was just a blissful reality because paper hadn't really caught on yet. We are going to become medieval peasants to discover the shocking truth that, despite the plague and the bad dentistry, you might actually have worked fewer hours than a modern Amazon delivery driver. You probably won't survive this, mostly because your back isn't strong enough to lift a scythe, and you have a dangerous dependency on antibiotics. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is. I love picturing the global map of sleepy people. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes. The room is dark, save for a few slivers of gray light creeping through the shutters. There is no buzzing smartphone on a knit stand. There is no glowing red digital display screaming 6 a.m. There is only the sound of a rooster who is taking his job entirely too seriously, and the rustling of straw as your children and possibly a goat shift in their sleep. You are a peasant in 14th century England. Your bed is a sack filled with dried heather, but strangely, you don't feel the crushing existential dread that usually accompanies a modern Monday morning. You sit up. The air is cold and smells of wood smoke and unwashed wool. You don't rush. You don't have a train to catch. You don't have a Zoom meeting at 9 o'clock. In fact, you don't really know what 9 o'clock is. You step out of your cottage into the pre-dawn mist. The village is quiet. The rhythm of your life is not dictated by a machine, but by the sun. If the sun is up, you can work. If the sun is down, you stop. This means that in the winter, your workday might be 6 hours long. In the summer, it might be 14. But crucially, you are not fighting the clock. You are riding the planet. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that medieval time was fluid. Hours were not fixed units of 60 minutes. They were canonical hours, based on the church bells calling monks to prayer, matins, lauds, prime, etc. An hour in the summer was literally longer than an hour in the winter, because the daylight period was divided into 12 equal parts, regardless of the season. You didn't check a watch. You listened for the church bell. If the wind was blowing the wrong way and you didn't hear it, well, guess you're just late, and nobody cares. You walk to the well to wash your face. The water is freezing, shocking you awake better than any double espresso. You look out at the fields. They are your office. There is no middle manager watching you. There is no efficiency expert timing how long it takes you to hoe a row of turnips. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit: the task orientation versus time orientation shift. Anthropologists argue that pre-industrial people didn't view labor and life as separate categories. You didn't go to work and then come home. Work was woven into the fabric of the day, interspersed with gossip, childcare, and staring at cows. If you met a neighbor on the path, you stopped and talked for 20 minutes. You didn't feel guilty about wasting time, because time wasn't money yet. Time was just the thing that happened while you were alive. The modern anxiety of I should be doing something productive simply didn't exist in your brain architecture. You trudge out to the strip of land you farm for the Lord. You have to plow today. It is hard physical labor. Your muscles burn. The mud sucks at your boots. But watch what happens when you get tired. You stop. You lean on the plow handles. You wipe your brow. You take a drink of ale from a leather flask. You watch a hawk circling overhead. You might rest for 10 minutes. You might rest for 30. In the modern world, this is time theft. In the medieval world, this is just being a biological organism. There is a famous study by Professor Juliet Schor called The Overworked American, which dropped a bombshell on the historical community. She calculated that a 13th century peasant in the UK might have worked only 150 days a year. The rest of the time was spent on holidays, festivals, Sundays, and just general downtime. You pick up the reins again. Walk on, you mutter to the ox. The ox moves slowly. The ox does not care about your KPIs. The ox defines the speed limit of your economy. You can't force the ox to hustle. If you whip him too much, he sits down. So, you cultivate a mindset of patient endurance. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the golden age of the peasant theory. Following the Black Death, 1348, the population of Europe crashed by up to 50%. Suddenly, labor was scarce. Lords were desperate for workers. Peasants found themselves with immense bargaining power. Wages rose, food became cheaper, and crucially, they demanded more time off. Some historians argue that the late 14th and 15th centuries were a golden age for the working class, where the balance of life and work was better than at any time until the 1960s. Others argue this is a romantic myth and that life was still nasty, brutish, and short. The next morning, the bell rings again. But this time, the rhythm is different. It is insistent. It is calling the roll. It is Sunday. In the modern world, Sunday is often just Saturday Part 2 or pre-Monday. It's a day for grocery shopping, doing laundry, mowing the lawn, or catching up on the work you didn't finish on Friday. It is a day of admin. For you, the medieval peasant, Sunday is radically different. It is a day of total stop. You put on your best tunic, the one that isn't stained with manure. You walk to the stone church in the center of the village. You have to go. This isn't a suggestion. If you don't show up, the church wardens will notice. You will be fined. You might even be put in the stocks if you make a habit of it. You enter the church. It is cool and dark, smelling of incense and damp stone. You stand. There are no pews yet for the Mass. It's in Latin, which you don't speak, but you know the rhythm. You look at the Doom painting above the chancel arch, a vivid, terrifying mural of demons poking sinners with pitchforks. It's the medieval equivalent of a horror movie, designed to keep you in line. But once the 8 Missa Est is spoken, and you step back out into the sunlight, the real magic of the Sabbath begins. You walk home. You look at your field. There is a weed growing near the path. Your hand twitches. You want to pull it. Stop. If you pull that weed, you are breaking the law. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that Sabbatarian law in the Middle Ages was strictly enforced by the church courts, often called body courts, because they also dealt with sexual morality. These courts had the power to fine you for doing any servile work on a Sunday. Records from the time show peasants being fined for mending a cart, carrying a sack of flour, or even shaving. The definition of work was anything that could earn you money or improve your material station. God demanded that you stop being an economic engine for 24 hours. This creates a psychological state that is almost impossible for a modern person to achieve: guilt-free idleness. When you sit on your bench outside your cottage on a Sunday afternoon, you aren't thinking, I should really be fixing the roof. You can't fix the roof. It is illegal to fix the roof. The option has been removed from your mental menu. Therefore, you can relax completely. You are liberated by the prohibition. You watch your neighbor, Thomas. He is a workaholic. He hates sitting still. He tries to sneak out the back to chop some firewood. Suddenly, a man in a dark hood steps out from behind a tree. It's the apparitor, the summoner for the church court. He hands Thomas a slip of parchment. Thomas is busted. He will have to pay 4 pence, a day's wages, for the crime of being productive. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit: the Sunday miracle stories. To reinforce these laws, the church circulated urban legends about what happened to people who worked on Sundays. There was a popular story about a man who baked bread on Sunday, and when he cut into the loaf, blood poured out. Another story told of a woodcutter whose hand stuck to the axe handle and couldn't be removed until he prayed for forgiveness. These were the viral fake news stories of the 13th century, designed to terrify you into taking a nap. So, what do you do with this mandated free time? You play. The churchyard, the consecrated ground around the church, is not a quiet, somber place. It is the village playground. After the service, the men gather to play dice or wrestling. The women gather to gossip. There might be a game of balls on the village green. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate. The sacred versus profane divide. Historians used to think that the medieval Sunday was a day of solemn prayer. But recent research into parish records suggests it was actually a day of rowdy chaos. The churchyard was used for markets, dancing, and even cockfighting. The line between religious observance and village party was incredibly blurry. Some historians argue that the church tolerated this behavior because it kept the community bonded. Others argue that the priests hated it, but were powerless to stop it. Basically, Sunday was a mullet. Business, mass in the front, party in the back. You spend the afternoon watching a game of 9 men's Morris drawn in the dirt. You drink ale. You laugh. You realize that the church acts as the medieval version of a labor union. In the modern world, labor unions fight for the weekend. In the medieval world, the church fought for the heli. They argued that the Lord, your boss, did not own your soul. God owned your soul, and God said you get a break. The church was the only institution powerful enough to stand up to the feudal lords and say, no, you cannot work them today. As the sun sets on Sunday, you feel truly rested. You haven't just paused your work. You have stepped out of the economic reality entirely. But here is the best part. In the modern world, you go to bed on Sunday night with the Sunday scaries, dreading the long 5-day stretch until the next break. But you, the peasant, look at the calendar again. Monday is a work day. Tuesday is the feast of Saint Swithin. You grin. Saint Swithin is a red-letter day. You realize that Sunday is just the baseline. The real jackpot of the medieval calendar lies in the saints. There are hundreds of them. And every time one of them has a birthday, or a death day, or a translation, when they move their bones, you get a day off. You are about to discover the Saint Day loophole. You are about to realize that the calendar is packed with divine landmines that blow up the work week in the most delightful way. You wake up on Tuesday morning. The sun is shining. The birds are singing. And the plow is staying in the barn. You stretch, scratching your ribs through your linen shirt. You aren't sick. It isn't Sunday. But today is the feast of St. Swithin, or perhaps St. Dunstan, or St. Bartholomew. You have hit a red-letter day. In the modern world, red-letter day is just a phrase meaning something memorable. But for you, it is a literal description of the calendar. The priest as Missal, the book of prayers, writes the holy days in red ink, rubrica, and the regular days in black. And looking at a medieval calendar, there is a lot of red ink. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that a typical 14th century peasant in England enjoyed between 40 and 50 mandatory church holidays per year, in addition to the 52 Sundays. When you do the math, that is roughly 90 to 100 days of leisure annually. That is nearly 3 months of guaranteed time off. Compare that to the average American worker today, who gets about 10 federal holidays and maybe 2 weeks of vacation, if they're lucky, totaling perhaps 25 days. You, the dirt poor serf, have roughly 4 times the vacation time of a modern corporate executive. You walk into the village. The atmosphere is festive. Since work is forbidden, the community gathers. There might be a procession where the statue of the saint is carried around the bounds. There is certainly ale. You realize that these holidays act as a release valve for the crushing pressure of feudal life. You can't quit your job. You are literally bound to the land. But the system is designed to give you frequent pauses. But not all saints are created equal. Some get a solemn mass. Others get a party. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit, the Guild Saint loophole. It wasn't just the universal church holidays you got off. If you were a member of a trade or a guild, you got their specific patron saint's day off too. Shoemakers took St. Crispin's Day, October 25th, to get roaring drunk. Blacksmiths took St. Clement's Day, if your village had a local cult of an obscure saint that nobody in Rome had ever heard of, like St. Urith of Chittlehampton. You took that off too. The calendar was hyper-localized. You could walk 10 miles to the next village and find them working, while you were celebrating the martyrdom of a guy who supposedly turned water into cheese. You watched the village priest blessing a basket of eggs. You might think, this is inefficient. How does anything get done? This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the Reformation critique. When the Protestant Reformation hit in the 16th century, reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin looked at this calendar and saw economic disaster. They argued that popish holidays bred laziness, drunkenness, and poverty. They slashed the calendar, removing almost all the saints' days and leaving only the Sabbath. Max Weber later argued in the Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism that this shift was essential for the creation of the modern industrial world. We traded our holidays for productivity. We got richer, yes, but we also got busier. But back in the 14th century, you aren't worried about the spirit of capitalism. You are worried about the spirit of St. Swithin. Legend says that if it rains on his feast day, it will rain for 40 days. You look up at the sky. It's cloudy. Don't rain, you mutter. If it rains, the harvest might spoil. But if it stays dry, the procession will end with a feast on the village green. You grab a cup of ale. It is weak, small beer, but it's hydration. You sit with your neighbors. You talk about the Lord's bailiff, who is a jerk, and the miller, who steals flour. You realize that these holidays serve a vital social function. They force the community to interact. In the modern world, we spend our leisure time alone watching Netflix, scrolling phones. In the medieval world, leisure is a team sport. You can't celebrate St. Swithin alone in your room. You have to do it with the village. As the sun sets on Tuesday, you feel refreshed. You have had Sunday off, Monday on, and Tuesday off. It's a work-life balance that a modern freelancer would kill for. But winter is coming. And in the winter, the nature of the holiday changes. It stops being about sitting in the sun and starts being about survival, darkness, and fire. Fast forward to January. The ground is frozen iron hard. The wind is howling. The Christmas season is over. We'll get to that later. And the grim reality of the new year has set in. You need to restart the agricultural engine. You need to wake up the earth. But you don't just go out and plow. That would be boring and hard. Instead, you and your neighbors devise a scheme to turn the first day of work into a riotous extortion racket. You are waiting for the first Monday after Epiphany. You are waiting for Plow Monday. The Christmas season has officially ended. The 12 days are over. The Yule log is just a pile of cold ash in the hearth, and the greenery you deck the halls with is starting to turn brown and brittle. It is early January. The ground is likely frozen solid, ringing like iron under your boots. The sky is a flat, unyielding gray. Technically, the holidays are finished. The church calendar says it is time to return to the fields. The soil needs to be turned. The winter wheat needs to be checked. The agricultural machine, which has been idling for 2 weeks, needs to be kick-started. But you, the medieval peasant, are not quite ready to let go of the fun. You look at the frozen earth. You look at your heavy, wooden plow. You look at your ox, who is happily chewing hay in the warm barn. You decide that the ox can stay where he is. You have a better idea. It is the first Monday after Epiphany, January 6th. It is Plow Monday. In a modern context, Blue Monday is the most depressing day of the year. But for you, Plow Monday is an excuse for one last raucous blast of chaos before the serious work begins. It is the medieval equivalent of a team-building exercise, except instead of doing trust falls, you are going to drag a heavy farm implement through the streets and threaten to destroy your neighbor's property if they do and give you beer money. You gather with the other young men of the village, the plow boys. You go to the barn and drag out the plow, but you don't take it to the fields. You decorate it. You tie ribbons to the handles. You weave straw into intricate knots. Then you dress up. You might blacken your face with soot to disguise yourself, a tradition that goes back centuries and signifies stepping outside of social norms. One of you might dress as the fool, covered in animal skins. Another, usually the burliest man in the group, might squeeze himself into a dress to play the Bessie, a pantomime Dane figure who carries the collection box. You hitch yourselves to the plow. That's right, no oxen today. You and 20 other guys act as the draft animals. Heave. Someone shouts. You pull. The plow scrapes loudly over the cobblestones or the frozen mud of the village lane. It is heavy, but the adrenaline is pumping. You are making a terrible racket shouting, blowing on cow horns, banging pots and pans. You aren't working. You are performing. You head for the house of the wealthiest landholder in the village. Maybe it's the squire or a rich yeoman farmer. You drag the plow right up to his front door. Penny for the plow light, you chant. Penny for the plow. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that the plow light was a real religious institution. In the parish church, a special candle, the plow light, was kept burning to bless the village's agriculture. Theoretically, the money you are collecting is to buy wax for this holy candle. It is a pious, charitable act. In reality, everyone knows that about 10% of the money buys wax, and 90% goes immediately to the local alehouse to fund a massive communal bender. It is a holy fundraiser that just happens to result in a hangover. The rich farmer opens his door. He looks at the mob of soot-faced men breathing steam in the cold air. He looks at the heavy iron coulter of the plow, which is pointed menacingly at his nice, tidy front garden. He has a choice. He can give you a few coins and some jugs of ale, or he can refuse. If he refuses, plow it up. The cry goes out. You and the lads put your backs into it. You drag the plow right through his front yard, tearing up his path, his flower beds, and his lawn. It is instant, weaponized landscaping. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit, the legalized vandalism clause. You might think this sounds like a crime. Today, you'd be arrested. But in the medieval village, this was often accepted custom. On Plow Monday, the normal rules of property and propriety were suspended. It was a reversal ritual. For one day, the laborers held the power, and the masters had to pay tribute. If the rich man was stingy, society decided he deserved to have his garden wrecked. It was a way for the poor to flex their collective muscle and remind the rich, you own the land, but we are the ones who turn it. Don't forget us. You move to the next house, and the next. By midday, you are sweating despite the freezing temperature. You have collected a bag full of pennies and consumed a dangerous amount of spiced ale. The village is alive with noise. It is a celebration of the tools of your trade, but it is also a celebration of your refusal to use them for work just yet. You are taking ownership of the plow. It isn't the Lord's tool today. It is your toy. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the pagan persistence theory. Folklore historians like Sir James Fraser, author of The Golden Bough, argued that Plow Monday was a thinly veiled pagan fertility rite. The dragging of the plow, the cross-dressing Bessie, and the blackening of faces were seen as ancient attempts to wake up the spirits of the earth and ensure a good harvest. They argued the church just slapped a candle fundraising sticker on a pre-Christian ritual. Modern revisionist historians, however, tend to be more pragmatic. They argue it was simply economic. The winter was hard, food was scarce, and this was a socially acceptable way for young, poor men to beg for money without losing their dignity. Why invoke earth spirits when you can just invoke the need for beer? As the afternoon wears on, the procession ends at the church to drop off the token wax money and then moves immediately to the tavern. The rest of the evening is a blur of singing, dancing, and sword dances, intricate folk dances, where men weave long metal or wooden swords into locked stars. It is dangerous, athletic, and loud. You stumble home late at night. The plow is left abandoned in the village square, decorated and absurd. You have successfully delayed the start of the work year by another 24 hours. But the reprieve cannot last forever. Tuesday comes. The ground is still frozen, but the hangover is real. You finally have to actually go to work. For the next few weeks, you settle into the winter grind. You repair fences. You thresh grain in the barn. It is the slow, dark time of the year. But you know that there is another explosion coming. You are moving towards Lent, the 40 days of fasting and solemnity before Easter. But the medieval mind operates on a principle of feast, then fast. You cannot enter the holy starvation of Lent without first consuming everything in the pantry and getting all your aggression out of your system. You are looking forward to Shrovetide. And specifically, you are looking forward to Tuesday. On that day, the village will not just drag a plow. They will turn the entire parish into a battlefield. You are about to play a game. But you wake up on a Tuesday in late February or early March. The air is still biting cold, but inside your cottage, the smell is incredible. It smells of sizzling lard, butter, and frying batter. Today is Shrove Tuesday. In the modern world, you might know this as Pancake Day or Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. It is the final day before the long gray slog of Lent begins. Tomorrow, the church will forbid you from eating meat, eggs, and dairy for 40 days. So, logical medieval economics dictates that you must eat all the eggs and all the fat in your house right now, or it will spoil. You sit down and gorge yourself on pancakes. You eat until you are uncomfortable. You are fueling up like a marathon runner. Because today isn't just about eating. It is about fighting. You step outside. The village is buzzing with a nervous electric energy. The shop shutters are up not to open for business, but to protect the windows. The local carpenter is boarding up the front of his house. You head to the market square or the large field between your village and the next one over. You meet up with your team. Your team consists of every able-bodied man and many sturdy women in your parish. Opposite you, standing across the muddy field, is the enemy, the neighboring village. They look full of pancakes and malice. In the center of the field stands a neutral party, holding the object of desire. It isn't a modern, aerodynamic sphere. It is a lumpy leather sack stuffed with cork, bran, or an inflated pig's bladder. This is the Ba, the referee, if you can call him, that tosses the ball into the air. And then, hell breaks loose. Welcome to Shrovetide football. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that medieval mob football, or folk football, bore almost no resemblance to the modern game. There were no offside rules, no penalty boxes, and no limits on the number of players. The pitch could be 3 miles long, covering rivers, hedges, and streets. The goals were often specific landmarks, like the mill wheel of one village and the church porch of the other. The objective was simple: get the ball to your goal by any means necessary. You run forward. You slam into the wall of bodies. You are instantly part of a scrum, a steaming, heaving mass of humanity. You can smell the sweat, the stale ale, and the wet wool. You can't see the ball. You just push. Someone punches you in the ribs. You elbow them back. It isn't personal. It's tactical. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit: the King's ban. This game was so disruptive that the government hated it. In 1314, King Edward II issued a proclamation banning football in London, complaining about the great noise in the city caused by hustling over large balls. It is one of the first recorded mentions of football in history, and it is literally a noise complaint. The king threatened imprisonment for anyone caught playing. Did the peasants stop? Absolutely not. They just played harder, arguably out of spite. You are participating in an act of civil disobedience just by tackling your neighbor. You slip in the mud. A pile of bodies falls on top of you. You are temporarily buried in a heap of groaning men. This is dangerous. Broken legs are common. Drownings happen if the scrum moves into the river. But there is a strange joy in it. For 364 days a year, You have to be polite to these people. You have to bow to the bailiff. You have to respect boundaries. Today, boundaries are meaningless. You can trample through the private gardens of the rich. Again, you can shove the miller into a ditch. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate: the safety valve versus ritual war theory. Sociologists like Norbert Elias argued that these violent games were a civilizing process, a way to channel aggression into a game rather than a feud. It was a pressure cooker release. If you beat up the neighboring village on Shrove Tuesday, you were less likely to burn down their barns in July. However, other historians argue that it was actually a form of ritualized warfare. It was a way for communities to assert their territorial rights. By marching the ball through a specific path, you were physically marking your territory, reminding the other village, "This is our land, and we are strong enough to take it." The game rages for hours. The sun begins to dip low in the sky. You are covered in mud from head to toe. Your nose is bleeding. You are exhausted. Suddenly, a roar goes up. Someone has broken away. A young blacksmith from your village has the ball. He sprints towards the stone bridge that marks your goal. He touches the ball to the stonework 3 times. Victory. The game ends not with a whistle, but with the fading light. The aggression evaporates as quickly as it started. You slap the back of the guy you were just choking. You limp back to the village together. You have survived the holiday. You have feasted. You have fought. You have experienced the highest peak of adrenaline your life can offer. But as you walk home, a bell begins to toll. It is the church bell calling for Vespers. But the tone is different. It is heavy, solemn. The party is over. The shriving is done. You go back to your cottage. You wash the mud off your face. You look at the empty plate where the pancakes were. Tomorrow morning, you will wake up to a very different world. The color will drain out of your life. The red ink on the calendar will turn to black and purple. You are about to enter the great slump. For the next 40 days, the church, your great protector of holidays, becomes your strictest dietitian. The fun is illegal. The meat is locked away. You are about to experience a different kind of time off. Not the time off of celebration, but the time off of lethargy. You are going to work less, simply because you don't have the caloric energy to work more. Welcome to Lent. You wake up on Wednesday morning, and the world has lost its color. The laughter of the football game is a distant memory. The smell of frying pancakes is gone, replaced by the smell of ... nothing. Or perhaps the faint, grim scent of cold ash. You walk to the church. You kneel. The priest dips his thumb into a pot of ash, made from burning the palm fronds from last year's Palm Sunday, and smudges a gritty cross onto your forehead. Memento homo quia pulvis is, et in pulverum reverteris. Remember, man, that thou art dust, and unto dust thou shalt return. Cheerful, right? Welcome to Ash Wednesday. You have just entered the Lenten slump. For the next 40 days, roughly 6 weeks, you are living in a different reality. The church has thrown a spiritual blanket over the village. The statues of the saints are covered in purple cloth. The altar is hidden behind a Lenten veil. The bells that usually mark your day ring less often, or in a more somber tone. Weddings are banned. Sex is strongly discouraged and technically forbidden on certain days. Fun is canceled. But the biggest change is in your stomach. You go home to eat. In the modern world, giving something up for Lent usually means trying to cut out chocolate, or maybe skipping Starbucks. It's a self-improvement hack. For you, it is a strict, legally enforced dietary embargo. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that the Lenten fast was incredibly restrictive. You were forbidden from eating meat. But meat didn't just mean steak. It meant anything that came from a warm-blooded animal. No beef, pork, or chicken. Crucially, it also meant no white meats, no eggs, no cheese, no milk, no butter, no animal fat, lard. Since olive oil was a luxury for Mediterranean people, you, the English peasant, are stuck cooking with linseed oil or mustard oil, which tastes a bit like engine lubricant. You are basically on a strict vegan diet, plus fish. And oh, the fish. You sit down to your meal. It is a piece of stockfish. Stockfish is cod that has been caught in the North Sea, gutted and dried in the wind until it has the consistency of a cricket bat. It is rock hard. To make it edible, your wife has to beat it with a hammer for an hour and then soak it in water for 2 days. Even then, it tastes like chewy, salty cardboard. Or perhaps you have red herring, herring that has been heavily salted and smoked until it turns a deep crimson and becomes salty enough to burn your tongue. You eat the fish. You eat a piece of coarse bread without butter. You drink water or weak ale. That's it. One main meal a day. Now, imagine trying to plow a field on that fuel. You walk out to the land. You feel lighter, but not in a good way. You feel hollow. Your energy levels have crashed. The explosive power you had on Shrove Tuesday is gone. This creates the Lenten slump. In the modern capitalist mindset, this would be a crisis. Productivity is down. The GDP is falling. But in the medieval mindset, this is just ... nature. Everyone understands that you can't work as hard during Lent. The Lord knows you are fasting. The bailiff knows you are fasting. Even the ox looks a bit thinner. The winter fodder is running low. So the pace of life slows down. You do the necessary work, feeding the animals, mending fences, but you don't push it. You physically can't. The entire economy enters power-saving mode. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the economic necessity theory. For centuries, the Church claimed Lent was purely for spiritual purification, to mortify the flesh and focus on God. But economic historians argue that the timing is suspiciously perfect. Lent falls in late winter, early spring. This is the hungry gap. The winter stores of meat are almost gone. The new lambs and calves haven't been born yet. The cows are pregnant and shouldn't be milked. If people kept eating meat and cheese at their normal rate, they would eat the seed corn of the next generation of livestock. By religiously banning meat and dairy for 40 days, the Church effectively rationed the food supply, ensuring the animals survived to breed in the spring. Was it theology? Or was it glorious supply chain management? You trudge through the mud. It is raining. It is always raining in Lent. You start to obsess about food. You dream of roast pork. You hallucinate cheese wheels. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit, the barnacle goose loophole. The medieval mind was desperate to find a way around the no-meat rule. They became very creative with biology. They looked at the barnacle goose, a migratory bird that disappears in the summer. They didn't know it migrated to the Arctic to breed. They assumed it hatched from barnacles on driftwood floating in the sea. The logic went, barnacles are sea creatures. Therefore, the goose is a fish. Therefore, we can eat it on Fridays. It was a magnificent piece of mental gymnastics that allowed rich monks to eat roast goose while claiming it was seafood. Sadly, you, the peasant, cannot afford a barnacle goose. You are stuck with the salted herring. Weeks drag on. First week, second week, third week. The mood in the village is irritable. Everyone is hangry, hungry plus angry. But there are small mercies. The fourth Sunday of Lent arrives. It is Mothering Sunday, or Refreshment Sunday. For this one day, the rules are relaxed slightly. You might visit your mother church, the local cathedral or main parish church. You might visit your actual mother. And crucially, the fast is eased. You might get a simnel cake, a fruit cake with a layer of marzipan. It tastes like heaven. It tastes like sugar and calories. It gives you the boost you need to survive the final stretch. You go back to the grind. The days are getting longer now. The sun is a little warmer. You can see green shoots appearing in the fields. But you are still stuck in the purple gloom. You realize that this holiday from normal life is actually a form of endurance training. It resets your baseline. After 40 days of salt fish and oil, a simple hard-boiled egg is going to taste like the most luxurious food on earth. This is the psychological genius of the medieval calendar. It uses contrast. In the modern world, we live in a state of constant medium-level gratification. We can eat a burger on Tuesday. We can eat a burger on Friday. We can eat strawberries in December. Because we can have everything all the time, nothing feels special. But you, the peasant, are being forced into the valley so that you can appreciate the mountain. You are being lowered into a sensory deprivation tank. You endure the final, hardest week, Holy Week. The fasting gets stricter. The church services get longer and darker. On Maundy Thursday, you watch the priest wash the feet of the poor. On Good Friday, the church is stripped bare. No candles, no ornaments, just cold stone and the story of death. You feel the weight of it. The world feels dead. You go to sleep on Holy Saturday. You are weak. You are tired of fish. You are tired of purple. But you know that tomorrow morning, the world is going to explode. You know that the great release is coming. The church bells, which have been silent or somber, are about to ring so hard they might crack the tower. The Lenten veil will be torn down, and most importantly, you are going to eat an egg. You are about to enter the biggest party of the year. You are about to enter Easter week. And trust me, nobody parties like a medieval peasant who hasn't eaten cheese for 6 weeks. You wake up, but this time, you aren't woken by a rooster, or a grumbling stomach, or the cold dread of a dark morning. You are woken by a sound that vibrates through the wooden frame of your bed and settles deep in your chest. Clang-a-lang-a-lang. The church bells are ringing, and not the polite, single bell toll of a Tuesday. Every bell in the tower is swinging. It is a chaotic, joyous, deafening riot of bronze. It is Easter morning. You step outside. The world has changed overnight. The gray filter of Lent has been lifted. The sun seems brighter, or maybe you're just delirious from the lack of protein. The village is awake. People are wearing their best clothes, bright reds and greens, dyed with madder and woad. You walk to the church. The doors are thrown wide open. Inside, the gloomy purple veils are gone. The altar is blazing with hundreds of candles, beeswax candles. The expensive kind that smell like honey, not the cheap tallow ones that smell like burning fat. A sepulchre, a mock tomb set up in the chancel, is empty. The priest shouts, "Christus surrexit," Christ is risen. You and the village shout back, "Surrexit vir," he is risen indeed. The relief is physical. The spiritual weight is gone. But more importantly, the dietary embargo is lifted. You rush home for the most important meal of the year. It isn't a banquet of roast swan. You aren't a duke after all. It is something far simpler and far more beautiful. It is a hard-boiled egg. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that the tradition of Easter eggs wasn't invented by a chocolate company. It was a direct result of the Lenten prohibition. For 6 weeks, your chickens had been laying eggs, but you were forbidden to eat them. You likely hard-boiled them to preserve them. By Easter Sunday, you had a massive stockpile of eggs. They were the symbol of the resurrection, life breaking out of the tomb. But they were also just a delicious, fatty, protein-rich bomb that your body was screaming for. You crack the shell. You eat the white. You eat the yolk. It tastes like victory. But the joy of Easter isn't just about breakfast. It is about time. In the modern world, Easter is a Sunday. Maybe, if you have a generous employer, you get Easter Monday off. For you, the peasant, Easter is an octave. It is an 8-day festival. The church law dictates that no servile work is to be done for the entire week. The plow stays in the barn. The loom is silent. For the next 7 days, the village is a playground. On Easter Monday, you might head to the churchyard for a game of handball. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit, the clergy handball match. You might think sports were beneath the dignity of the church. Think again. In many medieval cathedrals and parishes, the Easter celebrations included the bishop or the priest joining the choir boys and locals for a game of ball inside the church or cloister. There are records of archbishops engaging in pelota, dancing and tossing a ball while chanting. It was a symbolic representation of the sun or the resurrection, or maybe they just wanted to have fun. Imagine the Pope playing dodgeball in St. Peter's Basilica today. That is the vibe of a medieval Easter. But the real chaos happens a week later at Hocktide. This is the second Monday and Tuesday after Easter. The solemnity of the resurrection has faded, replaced by a weird, flirtatious, and slightly aggressive fundraising game. On Hock Monday, the women of the village take charge. They roam the streets carrying ropes. They catch any man they find, including the priest and the rich landowners, and they bind them. They tie them to chairs or tie their feet together. To be released, the man has to pay a ransom, a few pennies, a kiss, a promise of ale. On Hock Tuesday, the roles reverse. The men roam the streets and tie up the women, though records show the women usually raised more money than the men, suggesting they were better at the hustle. All the money goes to the Church Ale Fund, which we will discuss later. It is a sanctioned gender reversal game, a moment where the social hierarchy is flipped and turned into a joke. You watch your neighbor, the miller, getting tied to a gatepost by 3 laughing milkmaids. He is blustering and pretending to be angry, but he pays the ransom. Everyone is laughing. You realize that medieval holidays weren't just about rest. They were about social glue. They forced you to touch your neighbors, literally in the case of Hocktide, to laugh with them, to play with them. They prevented the community from fracturing under the stress of survival. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the Christianization of Easter theory. You have probably heard that Easter is named after a pagan goddess, Easter. This claim comes from a single source, the Venerable Bede, an 8th century monk. He wrote that the month of April was called Easterveneth and was dedicated to a goddess of spring. Victorian historians loved this idea and ran with it, claiming bunnies and eggs were ancient pagan fertility symbols co-opted by the church. However, modern historians are much more skeptical. There is zero archaeological evidence for a goddess named Easter outside of Bede's one sentence. Some argue Bede might have just guessed, or even made her up to explain the month's name. Was Easter a stolen pagan party? Or did the Christians just really like eggs? The jury is still out, but you don't care. You just want another slice of bacon. The week blurs into a haze of food, sports, and relaxation. You catch up on sleep. You repair your house, which, unlike fieldwork, is sometimes tolerated. You sit in the sun, which is finally warm enough to feel good. You look at your hands. The blisters from the Oakham room equivalent, spinning wool or whittling, have healed. The muscles that were tight from shivering in the Lenten cold have loosened. You feel human again. This is the purpose of the Great Release. It isn't just a reward, it is a reboot. The medieval year is a cycle of tension and release, fasting and feasting. It prevents the monotony that plagues the modern worker. You never do the same thing for 365 days straight. You shift gears constantly. By the time the Easter season begins to wind down, the world has fully turned to spring. The trees are green. The wildflowers are blooming in the meadows. The agricultural calendar says it is time to start looking at the crops seriously. The wheat is growing. The boundaries of the fields need to be checked. But in a world without GPS, Google Maps, or written land deeds, how do you know where your village ends and the next one begins? How do you stop your neighbor from secretly moving the boundary stone a few feet into your land? You don't hire a surveyor. You hire the entire village. You are about to embark on one of the most physically active and physically painful holidays of the year. You are going to walk the perimeter. You are going to look for landmarks. And to make sure the next generation remembers them, you might just have to beat a few children. You are getting ready for Rogation Days. The chaotic joy of Easter has faded into the steady, green rhythm of May. The sun is higher now, warming the back of your neck as you stand in the village square. The crops in the open fields are knee-high, waving in the gentle breeze. It is a time of hope, but also a time of anxiety. This is the delicate phase. A late frost, a swarm of insects, or a drought now could ruin everything. So the church decides it is time to do two things at once: beg God for protection and remind everyone exactly who owns what. It is Rogation Tide. Specifically, it is one of the 3 Rogation days leading up to Ascension Thursday. You aren't going to work in the fields today. You are going to walk around them. You join a massive crowd. The priest is there, wearing his vestments, but also wearing sturdy walking boots. The Lord's bailiff is there. The old men of the village are there. And crucially, a gaggle of young boys, including your son, is there, looking excited and slightly nervous. In your hand, you hold a long, flexible stick made of green willow or birch. "Move out," the bailiff shouts. You start to walk. You aren't walking down the road. You are walking the boundary. In a world without Zillow, Google Maps, or even reliable paper deeds, the map of your village exists solely in the collective memory of the people. If you forget where the boundary line is, the neighboring village might slowly start encroaching. They might graze their sheep on your common land. They might steal your timber. So once a year, you have to physically trace the line. You have to beat the bounds. You trudge through the tall grass. You scramble through thorny hedges. You wade through the stream. The line is the line. You cannot deviate. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that this procession, often called the Gang Days from the Saxon gangen, to go or walk, was a legal necessity. In an illiterate society, Proof of ownership was oral and performative. If a dispute arose later about whose land a certain oak tree stood on, the village elders could say, "It is ours, for we walked past it on Rogation Tuesday, in the year of our Lord 1345. The procession was a moving human deed of title. You stop at a large, gnarled oak tree at the corner of the wood. This is a gospel oak. The priest stops. He reads a passage from the gospel. He blesses the tree. He prays for the crops growing nearby. Rogare is Latin for to ask. You are asking God to stop the blight. You are asking the bugs to stay away." But then the tone shifts. The bailiff steps forward. He points to the tree. "Mark this stone," he shouts. You and the other men raise your willow wands and thwack the tree. Whack! Whack! You strip the bark. You make sure the tree looks different. But trees die. Stones get moved. What lasts longer than a tree? A human memory. Specifically, a human memory reinforced by trauma. The bailiff grabs a 10-year-old boy from the crowd. He drags him to the boundary stone. "Do you see the stone, boy?" He barks. "Yes, sir," the boy squeaks. "Good. Don't forget it." Then, the bailiff, or perhaps the boy's own father, takes the boy by the ankles and bumps him. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit: the educational bumping. The phrase "beating the bounds" didn't just refer to beating the ground with sticks. It meant beating the boundaries into the boys. To ensure the next generation remembered exactly where the village ended, the elders would inflict a sharp, memorable shock on the children at key locations. Sometimes they would bump the boy's buttocks against the stone. Sometimes they would dangle him by his heels over the stream. Sometimes they would just give him a good switch with the willow wand. Then, immediately after the pain, they would give him a coin or a sweet treat. The combination of pain and reward burned the location into the child's hippocampus forever. 50 years later, that boy would be an old man saying, "I know the boundary is here, because this is where old Miller Thomas held me upside down until I screamed." You watch your son getting bumped against a milestone. He yelps and laughs as he is given a piece of cake. It's a rite of passage. He is being woven into the geography of the parish. You continue walking. The line goes straight through a thicket of brambles. You don't go around. You hack your way through. The line goes through a barn belonging to a farmer on the edge of the parish. You don't go around. The farmer opens his front door and his back door, and the entire procession priest, cross, banners, and muddy peasants march right through his living room. He offers you ale as you pass. It is a reminder. The blisters on your feet from beating the bounds have barely healed when the calendar flips to one of the most beloved entries in the medieval year. It is late May or early June. The trees are fully in leaf. The days are stretching out, pushing back the night. It is Pentecost, known to you as Whitsun, White Sunday. In the modern world, Pentecost is a fairly minor religious observance involving red vestments and maybe a special sermon. For you, it is the start of the Whitsun Ale. You wake up with a specific kind of thirst. You aren't going to the tavern today. You are going to the church. But you aren't going to pray. Well, maybe a little. You are going to get drunk for the glory of God. You walk towards the churchyard. But instead of the smell of incense, the air is thick with the sweet, yeasty smell of fermentation. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that the church ale was the primary fundraising mechanism of the medieval parish. There were no bake sales, no silent auctions, and no tithes that stayed local. Tithes usually went to the rector or the distant monastery. If the church roof was leaking or the nave needed a new whitewash, the church wardens, the laymen elected to manage the building, didn't ask for cash. They asked for malt. Every household donated grain. The church wardens then brewed a massive batch of high-strength ale. They threw a party, sold the beer back to you, and the profit went into the fabric fund. You are literally drinking the church roof back into existence. You enter the church house, a building standing right next to the church, specifically built for these events. It is essentially a parish-owned brewery and banquet hall. The church wardens are standing behind barrels, acting as holy bartenders. "Drink up, Thomas," one shouts. The bell tower needs new ropes. You buy a leather jack of ale. It is strong. It is fresh. And best of all, it is guilt-free. In your mind, every sip is a charitable donation. You are a philanthropist. Outside on the village green, the entertainment has started. You hear the jingle of bells. You see men leaping into the air, handkerchiefs waving, sticks clashing. This is the Morris dance. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit, the Moorish connection. The term Morris is widely believed to derive from Moorish, Moresca. The dancers often blackened their faces, much like the Plough Monday boys, to disguise themselves as exotic figures from North Africa or Spain. It was a craze that swept through Europe. To the medieval peasant, this wasn't just a folk dance. It was a high-energy performance art piece, mimicking the wild warriors of the Crusades. It was rhythmic, athletic, and usually accompanied by a fool with a pig's bladder on a stick who would hit you if you didn't cheer loud enough. You watch the dancers. You drink more ale. The atmosphere is distinct from the rowdy violence of Shrove Tuesday. It is warmer, happier. It is a community picnic on a massive scale. There might be a king and queen of the ale, two villagers elected to preside over the feast. For a day, the ploughman is the king. He sits on a mock throne. The real lord of the manor might even stop by and tip his hat to him. It is another reversal ritual, loosening the tight corset of feudal hierarchy just enough to let everyone breathe. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the Puritan killjoy thesis. For decades, historians have argued about why these joyous festivals died out. The traditional view is that the Puritans of the 17th century killed them, and they certainly tried. Puritans looked at the Whitsun ale-drunk people dancing in the churchyard, men dressed as women, the mixing of the sacred and the profane, and saw the devil's work. Philip Stubbies, a Puritan writer in 1583, famously ranted about the drunkards who spent their money on swill rather than their families. He calculated that a man might spend a month's wages at a church ale. The debate is, did the Puritans kill the fun? Or did the rise of a cash economy make these barter-based festivals obsolete? Either way, you are enjoying the golden age of the parish party before the fun police arrive. You sit on the grass. The sun is setting, but it is still light. This is the beauty of the English summer. The simmer dim. You are surrounded by your friends. You are fed. You are watered. You feel a deep connection to the stone building looming over you. It isn't just a place where you get told you're a sinner. It's the place where you dance, where you drink, where you live. As night falls, the party winds down. You stumble home, your coin purse lighter, but your conscience clear. You have done your civic duty. But the sun is still getting stronger. The days are stretching to their absolute limit. You are approaching the pivot point of the year, the solstice. In the medieval mind, the longest day of the year isn't just an astronomical event. It is a dangerous moment. The sun refuses to set. It is 9 p.m., then 10 p.m., and the western horizon is still bleeding a bruised purple and gold. The birds are confused, tweeting in the twilight. You are standing on the highest hill in the parish, overlooking your village. It is June 23rd, the eve of St. John the Baptist. It is midsummer. In the modern world, the summer solstice is a day for druids to gather at Stonehenge and for everyone else to complain about the heat. For you, it is a night of cosmological anxiety. You know that tomorrow, the sun will begin its long, slow death march towards winter. You need to give it a boost. You need to perform sympathetic magic. You and your neighbors have spent the day dragging wood, brush, and old barrels up the hill. You have built a pyre that towers over your head. As the sun finally dips below the rim of the world, the priest, or the village elder, steps forward with a torch. Whoosh! the bonfire erupts. It is a beacon of light meant to mirror the sun, to encourage it, to say, "Stay strong, old friend." A mainstream historical fact you should know is that the Midsummer Watch was one of the most widespread festivals in medieval Europe. It wasn't just a party. It was a security operation. The watch referred to the custom of the village men standing guard all night, adorned with garlands of flowers and carrying crescent lights, torches in baskets on poles. In London, this evolved into a massive military parade with thousands of marchers, giants, and pageants. In your village, it's a bit more rustic. You are watching for spirits. The veil between the worlds is thinnest tonight. If you don't light the fire, the fairies might steal your milk, or worse, your children. You stare into the flames. The heat is intense. This brings us to a quirky, fringe tidbit: the bone fire etymology. You might wonder where the word bonfire comes from. It is in French for good fire, bon feu. It is Middle English for bone fire. In the medieval mind, the air was full of dragons and evil spirits on Midsummer's Eve. These creatures were believed to cause plague and poison the wells. The only way to drive them off was with a smell so noxious it would make a dragon gag. So the villagers would throw old animal bones and sometimes the bodies of dead livestock into the flames. The burning collagen and calcium created a thick, acrid, stinking smoke that drifted over the crops. You are literally fumigating the parish with the scent of burning skeletons to keep the monsters away. As the fire burns down to embers, the fun begins. The young men of the village line up. One by one, they run and jump over the fire. "Higher!" the crowd shouts. This isn't just a dare. It is agricultural magic. The belief is that your crops will grow as high as you can jump. If you clear the flames with a mighty leap, the wheat will be tall. If you trip and singe your trousers, it's going to be a bad year. You watch couples holding hands and jumping together. If they make it over without breaking their grip, they will be married within the year. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate: the theological appropriation strategy. The summer solstice is undeniably a pagan solar event. So why is it dedicated to St. John the Baptist? Historians point to a brilliant piece of theological branding. In the Bible, John the Baptist says of Jesus, "He must increase, but I must decrease." The church fathers looked at the solstice, the day when the sun begins to decrease, and assigned it to John. They assigned the winter solstice, when the sun begins to increase, to Jesus, Christmas. They perfectly mapped the Christian story onto the solar cycle, allowing you to be a devout Catholic and a sun worshiper at the same time. You stay up all night. You drink ale. You tell ghost stories. You are participating in the watch. As dawn breaks, you are exhausted but relieved. The sun has returned. The demons have been smoked out. The crops are safe. You walk down the hill, smelling of smoke and summer grass. But as you look at the fields in the morning light, you realize something sobering. The wheat is turning gold. The barley is heavy in the ear. The holiday season of spring and early summer is over. The games are done. The dancing is done. The harvest is coming. For the next 6 weeks, you will work harder than you have ever worked in your life. The medieval peasant had a lot of holidays, yes, but when they worked with a manic intensity that would kill a modern office worker. You are about to enter the crunch, but don't worry. At the end of this tunnel of sweat and reaping, there is a light. There is a party so big, so gluttonous, and so the last 6 weeks have been a blur of sweat, panic, and sharp metal. You have woken up before dawn. You have swung a scythe until your shoulders felt like they were filled with broken glass. You have raced against the rain clouds, knowing that if the wheat gets wet now, it rots, and the village starves in February. This was the crunch. This was the one time of year when the Saint Day loophole didn't apply. The church said, God understands if you miss Mass today. Get the barley in. But today, the silence has returned to the fields. The stubble is golden and prickly under your boots. The sheaves are stacked in the barn, reaching all the way to the rafters. You stand in the corner of the final field. There is one small patch of standing wheat left, a single clump. You and the other reapers gather around it. You don't just cut it. That would be bad luck. That last clump holds the spirit of the corn. You all throw your sickles at it from a distance, turning it into a game. Finally, the last stalks fall. A cheer goes up that startles the crows 3 fields away. Harvest home. You bind that last sheaf into a doll, the kern baby, and dress it in ribbons. You carry it like a holy relic back to the village. You are about to cash in your biggest bonus of the year. You are going to the harvest home. In the modern world, a company bonus is a direct deposit and maybe a muted thank you email. In the medieval world, the bonus is a calorie bomb. You wash the chaff off your face and head to the Lord's great barn. The doors are open. Inside, tables are set up, long trestle tables groaning under the weight of food. And not just pottage. We are talking about meat. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that the harvest supper was a legal obligation for the lord of the manor. It wasn't charity. It was part of the unwritten contract of feudalism. Manorial records from the 13th century list exactly what the lord had to provide. If he tried to serve cheap beer or stale bread, the peasants would riot. There are actual court cases where reapers sued their lord because the harvest beef was too tough. You are eating this roast goose not because the Lord loves you, but because he fears you. You sit down. The ale is flowing. It's the best ale, the strong stuff reserved for special occasions. You look up at the high table. The Lord himself is there. He raises a cup to you. For tonight, the barriers are down. You are all just people who survived the harvest. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit, the harvest queen transgression. In many parts of England, a female reaper, or the prettiest girl in the village, was crowned the harvest queen. She would sit at the head of the table, sometimes even in the Lord's own chair, wearing a crown of wheat. It was another moment of misrule. For one night, a peasant girl outranked the aristocracy. It allowed the village to blow off steam and pretend that hierarchy didn't exist, which paradoxically helped the hierarchy survive the rest of the year. You tear into a loaf of white wheaten bread, a luxury usually reserved for the rich. You eat until you can't breathe. The fiddler starts playing. You dance. You dance with the dairy maid. You might even see the Lord dancing with a peasant woman. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the paternalism versus exploitation argument. Traditional historians viewed the harvest home as a beautiful example of Merry England, a time when the classes lived in harmony. Marxist historians, however, look at it with deep cynicism. They argue this was a bribe of satiety. The Lord squeezed 364 days of labor out of you, took 50% of your crop, and then gave you one nice dinner to keep you docile. It was a calculated investment in social stability. Feed them once, and they won't burn down the manor. But frankly, with a belly full of roast beef and a head full of strong ale, you don't care about Marxist critique. You care that the barn is warm, the work is done, and you don't have to get up at dawn tomorrow. The party goes on late into the night. It is the end of the agricultural year. The grain is safe. The winter is secured. You stumble home under a full harvest moon. You feel a sense of completion that is rare in the modern world. In your office job, the work is never really done. The inbox just refills. But here, the field is empty. The barn is full. The task is finished. However, the end of the harvest means something else. For many of you, it means your contract is up. In the medieval world, labor contracts often ran from harvest to harvest. You are now technically unemployed. If you hate your master, if the food was bad, the work too hard, or the bailiff too cruel, this is your window. You can leave, but you need a new job. And you need to find it fast before the winter sets in. You aren't going to send out a resume. You aren't going to update your LinkedIn. You are going to take a piece of straw, stick it in your hat, and walk to the nearest market town. You are going to sell yourself to the highest bidder. You are going to the hiring fair, or, as the locals call it, the mop. You wake up on a crisp morning in late September. The harvest stubble is wet with dew. The air smells of wood smoke and rotting apples. You pack your few belongings into a bundle. You look at the fair mouse where you have lived for the past year. You look at the farmer who has been your boss. Goodbye, you say. Or maybe just a grunt. You are walking away. You are untethered. It is Michaelmas, September 29th. The feast of St. Michael the Archangel. In the medieval and early modern calendar, this is moving day. It is the end of the fiscal and agricultural year. Old contracts expire today. New ones begin. You are unemployed, but you aren't worried. You are a valuable commodity. You walk to the nearest market town. As you get closer, you hear the noise. It sounds like a riot, but it is actually a recruitment drive. You have arrived at the hiring fair, also known as the mop. In the modern world, looking for a job involves tweaking your CV, scrolling through LinkedIn, and enduring 3 rounds of Zoom interviews where you pretend to be passionate about synergy. In the medieval world, you just stand in the street and wait for someone to buy you a drink, but you need to advertise. You don't have a business card. You use semiotic fashion. If you are a shepherd, you hook a tuft of wool into your hatband. If you are a carter, you carry your whip. If you are a cowman, you pin a wisp of cow hair to your lapel. If you are a general laborer, a jack of all trades, you stick a piece of straw in your mouth or your hat. You stand in lines in the market square, grouped by trade. You are literally a living menu of labor. The farmers walk up and down the lines. They eye you up. They squeeze your biceps if you're a man, or check your teeth and hips if you're a woman. It feels dehumanizing. It feels like a cattle market. But here is the twist. You hold the cards. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that after the Black Death, 1348, the population of England collapsed. Labor was incredibly scarce. The balance of power shifted violently from the lords to the peasants. The government panicked and passed the Statute of Laborers, 1351, which made it illegal to pay a peasant more than pre-plague wages. It was a maximum wage law. But at the hiring fair, the law of supply and demand overruled the law of the king. Farmers were desperate. They would whisper in your ear, offering you illegal perks, extra cheese, a new tunic, or simply cash under the table to sign with them instead of their neighbor. The mop fair was the center of a massive black market in wages. A farmer stops in front of you. "How much?" he asks. £5 a year, you say boldly. "And meat twice a week." He scoffs. He walks away. But he comes back 10 minutes later. He knows he can't get the harvest in next year without you. "Done," he grunts. He reaches into his purse and hands you a silver shilling. This is the god's penny, or earnest money. Once you accept this coin, the contract is legally binding. You are his man or woman for the next 365 days. You cannot quit. You cannot be fired unless you do something terrible. You have job security that a modern gig economy worker can only dream of. But you don't save that shilling. Tradition dictates that the god's penny must be spent immediately. Where? At the fair, of course. The hiring fair isn't just a job center. It is a carnival. There are stalls selling gingerbread, ribbons, and toys. There are bear baiting pits. There are traveling actors performing plays on the back of wagons. You take your new signing bonus and you head straight to the beer tent. You are celebrating your new employment by getting absolutely hammered. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate, the freedom versus serfdom spectrum. Historians argue about how free these laborers really were. On one hand, the hiring fair looks like freedom. You choose your master. You negotiate your pay. It looks like a modern labor market. On the other hand, the Master and Servant Act meant that if you broke your contract or ran away, you could be imprisoned and whipped. You were free for 1 day a year. For the other 364, you were essentially property. Was the mop fair a celebration of liberty, or just the day the cows got to choose which slaughterhouse they went to? But sometimes you make a mistake. You wake up the next morning with a pounding headache. You realize the farmer you signed with is Old Man McGregor, who is known for beating his servants and serving rotten pottage. You have made a terrible error. Are you doomed for a year? Not necessarily. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit. The runaway mop. The system had a built-in cooling-off period. Exactly 1 or 2 weeks after the main fair, a second, smaller fair was held in the same town. This was called the runaway mop, or the little mop. If you regretted your choice, you could technically return the shilling, if you hadn't drunk it all, and come back to the market to look for a new master. It was a buyer's remorse market for humans. It protected both sides. The farmer could dump a lazy worker, and the worker could escape a bad boss. You decide to stick with your choice. You pack your bag. You walk to your new farm. You settle in. The days are getting shorter rapidly now. The trees are bare. The frost is returning. The agricultural year is winding down. The crops are in. The hiring is done. But there is one final bloody task that needs to be done before winter truly locks the land in ice. You look at the pigs. They have been fattening up on acorns in the forest all autumn. They are huge, round, and squealing. You cannot feed them through the winter. You don't have enough hay. So the logic is brutal and simple. You have to kill them. But in the medieval world, death is always followed by a feast. You are about to enter the carnage of Martinmas. You are about to eat fresh meat for the last time until spring. Get your knife sharp. It's going to get messy. The golden days of the hiring fair are gone. The trees are stripping down to skeletons. The wind coming off the North Sea has teeth again. It is November. You stand in the muddy yard of your new master's farm. The air is filled with a sound that is both prosperous and terrible, the squealing of pigs. It is Martinmas, November 11th, the feast of Saint Martin of Tours. To the church, this is a day to honor a Roman soldier who cut his cloak in half to share it with a beggar. To you, the peasant, this is the Great Slaughter. A mainstream historical fact you should know is that the Anglo-Saxons explicitly called November Bloodmonth. Blood month? This wasn't because they were gods. It was because of a brutal agricultural equation. In the medieval era, before the introduction of winter root crops like turnips and swedes in the 18th century, it was almost impossible to keep a large herd of cattle or pigs alive through the winter. There simply wasn't enough hay. You kept the breeding pairs, the strongest bull, the best sow, and you killed the rest. So, on Martinmas, the village turns into an open-air abattoir. You grab a pig. It has been fattening up on acorns, pannage, in the forest all autumn. It is heavy, angry, and strong. You wrestle it down. The knife flashes. It is bloody work. It is messy, but strangely, it isn't sad. In a world where hunger is a constant threat, a dead pig is a promise of survival. A dead pig is money in the bank. But here is the catch. You can't salt everything. Preserving meat takes time and vast amounts of expensive salt. And there are parts of the animal that just don't keep. You can't salt the blood. You can't salt the liver, the heart, or the intestines. So, logical conclusion? You have to eat them. All of them. Right now. Martinmas becomes the carnivore's carnival. For a few days, you live like a king. You are making black puddings, blood sausages, by the yard. You are roasting the offal, which in the modern world is cheap, but to you is a nutrient-dense superfood. You are eating fresh pork chops until grease runs down your chin. This brings us to a quirky fringe tidbit, the St. Martin's goose. While pigs were the main event, the traditional bird of the feast was the goose. Legend says St. Martin tried to hide in a goose pen to avoid being made a bishop, but the geese honked and gave him away. To punish the geese for their snitching, we eat them. In medieval Europe, the Martinmas goose was as iconic as the Thanksgiving turkey is today. It was the last fresh poultry you would taste for months. You sit in the farmhouse kitchen. The fire is roaring. The smell of roasting meat is overwhelming. You are drinking St. Martin's wine, the first tasting of the new vintage, if you live in wine country, or just strong ale if you're in England. You are feasting on death to ward off death. But as you eat, you look at the corner of the room. There stands the salting trough. The prime cuts the hams, the sides of bacon. The beef rounds are being packed into barrels of brine or rubbed with dry salt. They will hang in the smoky rafters of the roof. This leads to a fascinating scholarly debate. The salt starvation theory. Salt was precious. If you didn't use enough, the meat rotted. If you used too much, the meat became inedible leather. Some historians argue that the medieval winter diet was so high in sodium that it caused widespread hypertension and health issues. Others argue that peasants knew how to freshen the meat by soaking it, and that the diet was actually quite balanced. But the real debate is about access. Salt was often taxed, the gabelle in France. Did the poorest peasants have enough salt to preserve their own meat? Or were they forced to sell their pigs to the Lord and live on porridge? The archaeological evidence pig bones found in peasant trash pits suggests you managed to keep at least a little bit of the bacon for yourself. The feast ends. The blood is washed away. The remaining meat is locked in the salting tub. Now the world closes in. The sun is barely up for 8 hours a day. The mud in the yard freezes into jagged ridges that can twist an ankle. The fields are empty and hard. You enter Advent. Like Lent, this is a fasting period. The little Lent. You go back to fish. You go back to the dark. But this darkness is different. It is the darkness of anticipation. You are waiting for the sun to return. You are waiting for the birth of Christ. And practically, you are waiting for the Christmas break. In the modern world, you might get Christmas Day and Boxing Day off. If you're lucky, maybe the week between Christmas and New Year's. But you, the medieval peasant, are about to clock out for the longest, most comprehensive holiday